This session, I call it Java Life is Short. Kind of a provocative title maybe, but it's really about productivity and some tools that we can use with Java to make our lives more fun, more interesting. So this is a very kind of opinionated talk because there's many tools, many ways that you can have fun with Java and be more productive. But yeah, so don't shoot me if I didn't mention some tool that you really like, so this is just like kind of my take on things. So, at the start of everything, of course, if we start with Java, you've all seen the hello world, right? So, but it's actually not so easy to get started with Java because, like if for a new developer, they have to know like, why is it public versus private? What's a class? What is a static method? What's a void return type, or what is all that? Then there's some arguments that you pass in, and they're not even used in this statement. So and then system output. Anyway, there's a lot going on, right? So of course the Java community is awesome. They're working on different ways to make this simpler. You can check out Project Amber if you haven't looked that up, and so we're working on anonymous classes and everything in Java 21 and 22. But at the end of the day, it's still kind of hard to get started with Java. So one project that works pretty well for simple use cases and actually for kind of standalone scripts with Java is Jbang. So instead of doing Java compile and then Java run of writing your code to finally get your hello world, you can just use this tool called Jbang. And so let's try that out. And yeah, this is gonna keep whining if there's no internet, but I'm gonna. All right, that's it. And I'm plugging it for now, and then we'll revisit that later. Anyway, so here's Jbang. So with Jbang, you have a CLI tool. I'm going to make this a little bit bigger. There we go. Hopefully everybody can see that. So you can do Jbang init and then just some files. So we can do well, of course, hello world.java. And by doing that, you create a file, and you'll see no surprise is that it'll be very similar to our starter code, right? So it created this class just by creating Jbang init. And then the file name, so you can get started with your hello world. You can see like this line at the top too, like the / user bin env jbang, which even allows you to run this without calling Java specifically. So it'll do that, and it'll actually download Java on your machine if you don't have it. So for new developers, this is pretty handy, right? So you can do. Let's see. I'm gonna make sure my terminal fits properly. So now we can just run this file. So I think I called it hello world.java, and well, no surprise, of course, there's our hello world. So that's it. That's the talk. No, just kidding. But actually, Jbang is more interesting than just kind of doing these hello world scripts. So first of all, you can use it if you want to create kind of more scripting stuff instead of reverting back to creating a bash script or Python or something. This is actually pretty handy for writing your scripts with Java. Another kind of fun, it's a little bit gimmicky, but where everything's talking about AI and ChatGPT these days, right? So actually you can use that with Jbang. So you can do Jbang, and this is a preview feature. So you can do Jbang preview init, and then let's call it gpt.java, and then you can just tell it, hey, create an application that returns the square root of a given number. I don't know. If anybody has a better idea, this is what comes up. And of course, I don't have internet, so so it's supposed to go out to the OpenAI server. And then return a script that actually has this. So let's see if maybe I have an example of what this would be that I created before, so we can look at this. So let's pretend that this worked. And you can see here, this is what we got back from GPT. So by using an API key with OpenAI, you can interact with it, and it seems like it created something that might be useful, right? So I didn't write this code. We can all debate if it's the best code, but it created something, right? So it's a nice start to do something with. So we can do GPT Java, and let's see what it does. It says provide a number, so let's do 9. At least I can get that far that the square root of 9 is 3. So we can see that it actually worked, right? So that's Jbang, which I think is a pretty cool tool if you're getting started, if you want to write scripts, if you want to play around with some fun chat GPT stuff. So just recapping. So Jbang init, and then you can create a file. What's also really interesting with Jbang is you can create CLI scripts by just adding a template flag. So you do Jbang init -- template, and it'll create a file that already has like Pico CLI, if you're familiar with that. So you can add parameters to your file, and then if you do like -h, then you can see the parameters. So again, you can get up and running pretty quickly with creating scripts. And then like I said, you can print a cat if you want to do if you want to use ChatGPT, or say create a currency converter or whatever. Yeah, so Jbang. Who already knew about Jbang? Just out of curiosity. Okay, so not a lot of people, which that's I'd say let's definitely check it out. So yeah, we've probably all seen that Java 21 came out, right, in September. So these kids are pretty excited about it. I think a lot of people were excited about it, me too. But so, now we have to switch Java versions, right? So in managing multiple Java versions, because not all our applications are running Java 21, who's running Java 21 already in production? 0 hands. All right. Excellent. And I'm assuming probably you're playing around with Java 21. What about Java 17? How many people are using that in production? All right. So a lot more hands. What about 11? Okay. So still a fair amount of hands. And 8? There's no shame. Okay. It happens, right? Yeah. That's the real world. But so, let's say we want to try out Java 21 on our local machine. How do we manage multiple Java versions, right? So we probably have some legacy projects running Java 8, some newer projects, Java 11, state-of-the-art 17, and then, YOLO Java 21, which apparently there's no YOLO people here that are running it already on production, but it works pretty well. Maybe you have certain vendor-provided Java versions that you need to run. So there's Tamarin from the Adoptium program. That's that's one that Red Hat provides, collaborates on. Or you can maybe use GraalVM. And anyway, so now you switch between all these different versions. It becomes a little complicated, right? So one project that helps a lot with that, especially if you're on Linux or Mac, on Windows, you can use it with WSL. I think otherwise maybe Chocolatey is an interesting one too, but I'm not a Windows person, so maybe you have a better idea. Anyway, for the rest of us, SDKMAN is a really cool project, right? Who already uses SDKMAN? So about half, maybe 40% of the room. Excellent. So SDKMAN allows you to, kind of switch between and install different Java versions. So let's see if we can demo that without the internet. So SDK. So again, simple CLI script. So list Java, and then it says you're offline. So I'm just only going to show you the versions that you already have. So I happen to have different Java versions on my local machine. So we have 21 and some 17 and some 11. And then, if I wanted to install a new version, you could do SDK install Java, and then, you would tab, and then if the internet was connected, it would show me, the different versions of Java. So then you could say, hey, I want to install Java 21 Tamarin, and then, it would install it. Fortunately, I already have this installed. Wow, that's a really in-your-face error message, right? So, internet not reachable. Anyway, so that's how you would install a new version, and then you can switch between different Java versions. So you can just do SDK use Java, And then you can say, these are the versions that I have on my local machine. So maybe I want to switch to Java 17, whatever. We'll see what Java 17 open. And then now I'm using Java version 17 open in this shell, right? So now if I do Java version, we can see OpenJDK version 17. And then if I do SDK use Java 21 Tamarin, and now I do Java version, we can see that now I'm using Java 21. So you can switch between different versions of Java very easily. Or if you want to use GraalVM, for example. And SDKMAN works for other JVM projects as well. So you can use it to install Maven. So if you want to, maybe experiment with Maven 4, you can install Maven 4 and then switch between Maven 3 and 4 to see, like, hey, is my project compatible with Maven 4? Are there any breaking changes or whatever? You can install it. You can install Jbang with SDKMAN as well. You can upgrade as well, right? So you can just do SDK upgrade, and if you don't specify any parameters, it'll upgrade all your versions to the latest version of that X release. And then you can also install the Quarkus CLI, which we'll cover Quarkus in a little bit as well. So that was SDKMAN. So most of the time with Java, this is the cycle, right? We do our coding, then we compile, then we deploy it on our local server or whatever if we're creating an API or an application, then we run it, we test it, and then repeat it, right? We write some code, then have to compile and deploy, which is, a little bit annoying, especially if you come from a different language where, an interpreted language where you can just, make your changes and refresh your browser and you're good to go. So, that's what we want to have with Java as well. So one of the projects that does that pretty well is Quarkus. Which I'm a big fan of, so I'm very biased towards Quarkus. But it's pretty cool actually. So if we go to no internet, thank you. Keep reminding me of this. So I'm gonna have to think because I was gonna start from scratch with a Quarkus application and get it from the internet, but without internet, fortunately, I have a couple of ones that are backed up. So. I have a, let's open the Quarkus with DB. So let's do Quarkus with DB. And so let's pretend that, I just installed this, created it from scratch, super cool. So if I do now Quarkus dev, I start my application on my local machine. So you can do this with Maven too, Maven Quarkus dev, or you can use Gradle. So the Quarkus CLI is kind of handy because you can do some things and it's a fairly simple syntax. But you can see here by doing Quarkus dev, and this one has some dependencies, but it doesn't necessarily matter. Oops, that's a little sneak preview for one of the next things. But anyway, if I go to my local host 8080, unfortunately I do have some demos that don't need the internet. We can see that, I created a Quarkus application. So basically, if you just do Quarkus create app, you can create this new application and gives this little page. And then you can see, it creates this hello endpoint. And then let's make a little change in here. So by default, if you create a new Quarkus application, and I guess I was in Croatia last time I demoed this this cached version, so we can say return hello JFall. And I'm not making any changes, right? So I just changed the code. So if I refresh now, we can see that, like that we immediately have that change. So I didn't need to recompile and redeploy. This just happens, on the fly, which is really handy, I think, with Quarkus. Also because it doesn't reload everything, right? It just reloads what it sees has changed. But so it also provides some tests. So let's look at our test here. We have our greeting resource test, and it's looking for, the pozdrav Ratska or whatever. So we need to change that because if I start my testing. So this Quarkus dev mode also has a testing thing. So you can see there at the bottom it says like R to resume testing. So if I hit R, it's going to run my tests. And we'll notice that, well, this test doesn't match with what I change it to, right? Because I change it to hello JFall. So I need to fix my test to JFall, and I have no idea how many exclamation points, so we'll see it fail. But I can immediately see it fail. So as I'm writing code, I get the quick feedback of what's changing. So it looks like there's 3 exclamation points, so I add those, and now my tests are happy. And again, this is kind of the same concept where it doesn't rerun all your tests, right? So if you have a big application and you say, well, yeah, every time I type a new character, it's going to rerun all my tests, that would be pretty painful. So it's actually smart enough to look, at the class path and everything to see, just what changed. So that's, that's some cool things with Quarkus that I think are pretty handy to make our lives a little easier. And, life is short, right? So if we can speed it up a little bit. Another really cool project is TestContainers. Who uses TestContainers right now? So about half of the audience is it's a cool project, right? So for those who don't know it, TestContainers allows you to, well, as the name says, use containers for your testing. So, instead of if you have a database dependency and, you want to test it on your local machine or in your CI pipeline, it means that you have to have a database somewhere, right? So you need to create it on your local machine. You need to configure it, tie it in with your application. And so what TestContainers does, it uses containers that are pre-built. So for example, a Postgres database or a MySQL database or whatever, you just add it to your configuration that you're using that database. And so every time you run your tests, it'll spin up a container with that database, so you don't have to constantly be messing around with installing different databases. So it's a very cool project, highly recommend. But like I said, I'm a big fan of Quarkus, and actually TestContainers with Quarkus is even cooler. So you have this concept of dev services in Quarkus. So actually, who's already played around with Quarkus? Okay, so just a few hands. So these dev services is really cool because it uses TestContainers not just to run your tests, but actually in that live coding mode that I was just showing you. And actually the project that I was showing, if anybody was really quick to read the logs, you would have noticed that as I started up this dev mode, it spun up a container, in this case a Postgres database, because I have a dependency on Postgres. So this was created when I started up. So I'm going to stop my live mode. I'm going to delete this container just to show you how it works. So we'll start up Quarkus dev again, and then read real quick. And you'll see that at some point it says right there, database is starting Postgres 14. So I did not configure anything to use this on my local machine. So I just added the dependency for Postgres, and then I just have this kind of fruits resource, this endpoint right here that just returns some fruits from a database that I have defined in this fruit entity with a name and a season. And yeah, this is using Panache entity, so it's a little bit, it uses Hibernate and then tries to simplify our life a little bit by just defining your properties. You don't have to create getters and setters. Actually, when you compile your application, it's going to create the private properties and getters and setters. That's also a cool project, but that's kind of out of scope of this. But anyway, so by just starting this dev mode, we can see that if I go back to my Podman Desktop here, we can see that this database container was just created a minute ago. And usually when you stop your live mode, it's going to tear down that container. However, I have a little bug in my machine, so it's actually not going to tear it down, but usually it does. And so if we go now to my demo application, we can see if we go to our fruit endpoint, localhost, wow, what is it doing? Localhost 8080/fruit. We can see, that it's returning some fruits. because I also added an import.sql to my application, just to populate my database with some fruits, and it automatically picked this up as well. So I didn't have to configure anything for this. So dev services is Quarkus with TestContainers. Of course, it uses that for your tests as well. If you use TestContainers with Spring Boot, for example, you'll know that you do have to make some configuration changes. With Quarkus. You actually don't. So that's why I like Quarkus, because it's just like tiny little bit easier still. So now we've been talking about some kind of local development and what we call the inner loop, right? So in our inner loop, we're doing local development, we're coding, my testing, get my quick feedback on how my application is running. I'm probably going to do some debugging and whatever more. And then at some point, you're going to say like, hey, my code is pretty good. And I'm going to create a pull request or a merge request. Typically, I'm assuming this day and age. And then then we enter what we call the outer loop. And the outer loop basically is where maybe somebody might do a code review, where your application gets pushed to the to your registry. You'll do some CI stuff, so you'll go through a pipeline. Maybe do some security checks, some compliance checks. Yes, you can actually do some security stuff in your inner loop too, but in your outer loop, you'll probably have some more scanning and everything, and then eventually you'll deploy, right? And a lot of the times these days, we deploy to in containers and to Kubernetes. So now for us Java developers, that means we need to now know about containers and cloud and Kubernetes and serverless and everything. So like the cognitive load is like goes up again. So what can we do to make our lives nicer and more productive with that? So a lot of the tools that you'll see out there to create containers. There's build packs, there's Builda, there's Canico, there's Docker, there's Jib, there's Podman. There's a lot of choices out there to be made to create containers, right? And then, so each tool does things a little bit differently. So out of curiosity, who uses Jib here? So we got, a few hands. Who uses Docker? More hands, unexpectedly. Who uses Podman? Okay, we got 2 hands, awesome. I like Podman, that's why. But that's a project that we're working on at Red Hat, so of course I'm a little bit biased. But anyway, kind of going back to Quarkus. Sorry, I'm just a fan of Quarkus, but what you can do instead of using Docker build and creating Docker files and or using Jib or whatever, with Quarkus you can just do Quarkus image build. And you'll build a container image. So the only thing that you'll need is, for example, if you want to use Docker, you'll need your Docker runtime on your local machine or Podman. But you can use also Jib, for example. So you can use Quarkus image build Jib, and it'll build your container image with Jib, which means that then you don't need a container runtime, right? So let's try that real quick. So let's say that I'm done here with my awesome local development. I have some fancy fruits in my database. It's a very complicated application, of course. And so let's do Quarkus image, if I can type it right, build. And so by just doing that, you'll see that it's going to compile my application. And then ideally, if everything goes well, yes, fortunately, I have my base image cached. And you can see I actually already created a container image of my application. So it's really quick and easy, fairly painless. In my case, because I have Podman installed on my local machine, if you had Docker installed, it would do the exact same thing. And if not, you can, like I said, do Quarkus image build Jib if you want to use Jib, or you want to use build packs, you do Quarkus image build build pack. The only thing is that you add the extension, the dependency for it. Anyway, so let's see, so I have a Podman Desktop. Let's see if my image was created. And yes, sure enough, it was created 37 seconds ago. And well, we can try to run it. The only thing is that now this is an application that is running, let's say, in production mode, right? Because I'm not running in the dev mode anymore. So if I start it, we'll see that it'll probably have some issues. Logs, there we go. Because it's looking for the Postgres database that I'm not running with test containers anymore, right? So we can see that it fails now because, you know, I'd need to configure it. But, you know, I was able to quickly build a container image and run it. So, you know, that's with Quarkus image build. What you can also do is you can do Quarkus image push, also, you know, -- also build, and it'll actually build your container and push it to a registry, which I would have shown you, but my remote registry likely won't know that I'm trying to connect to it without having internet, right? But yeah, so it is pretty quick and easy. So then, you know, we have our container, and then oftentimes, or most of the time, we'll want to deploy that to, you know, some cloud environment with, you know, on a Kubernetes or maybe some serverless deployment or whatever. And so now we need to be experts in YAMLs. Yes. Who loves YAMLs? We have some YAML lovers, nice. So yeah, for those who aren't YAML lovers, you'll look at this maybe with some apprehension, right? So this is a fairly simple deployment on Kubernetes, right? So you have a deployment and a service, which is kind of the minimum that you need to deploy. And you know, like I know a little bit about Kubernetes, but I would not write this from scratch or by hand, right? So we need some way to deploy more easily. So there's different tools that you can use to do that. But you know, I remember how I said I was a fan of Quarkus. So with Quarkus, actually, all you need to do is just say Quarkus extension add Kubernetes. So Quarkus extensions are pretty cool because they add, you know, dependencies to your application with some convenient wrappers. So there's, for example, a Kubernetes extension, and then you can just do Quarkus deploy. If you're logged into your cluster, it'll deploy your application immediately. And that would have been another cool one to show you how to do that, but you know, unfortunately, without internet, that's not going to do much. But I will show you something that is a little bit cool too. So you can just do add the extension. So you know, we can do through the CLI, or maybe I can use the Quarkus plugin. I'm using VS Code here. Oh, I guess without the internet that won't work, but we can do Quarkus extension add Kubernetes because I already have it cached, so that should work. Okay. And so by doing that, if we now compile, so we can do, well, Maven package or whatever, because I add that extension, it'll add Kubernetes, it'll generate the required Kubernetes YAMLs and put them in my target folder. So we're going to see that appear here in just a second. There we go. And we can see now it created, you know, if you saw the slide before with deployment and the service, we can see that that service and that deployment are here, and I can deploy to Kubernetes pretty easily. So you know, if you have, you know, something like OpenShift, it's pretty easy because you can push your code to OpenShift, it'll build it. But in this case, I'm just using kind of a generic kind of Kubernetes instance, and then you know, it would just push it. The only thing is that I did cheat a little bit. So in my application properties, you can see like this prod, Quarkus, blah, blah, blah. So by adding the prod you know, prefix to my configurations, it's not used when I use my application in dev mode, because otherwise it would try to create database connections and stuff like that. So in this case, we can see that, you know, I added, you know, what database to talk to and so on and so forth. But we can see here that I also added, you know, where my registry is, what my group and name and tag is, and it picked that up and added that to that Kubernetes YAML that it generated. So if we go back to the Kubernetes YAML, we can see that it added secrets because I also told it to use secrets in the application properties. But in the service and the deployment, we can see that it's using, you know, my registry with my name and everything, and it picked that up from my application properties. So, you know, I find that pretty handy to use with, you know, like with Java. So you can use this with Kubernetes, or if you want to do serverless, well, in this case, I was using Knative, but if you want to deploy to AWS Lambda or whatever, you can also just add an extension for that, and it'll deploy it pretty easily. So now, let's say that I pushed my application to Kubernetes, which sadly, again, couldn't show it, but that's okay. Now we're kind of done, right? The application is running in production, we're all happy, and of course, our SREs, they aren't so happy because, you know, like maybe something goes wrong or we have some performance issues or whatever. So actually, we need to add observability to our application, right? So there's two tools that I like and that, you know, are fairly easy to use to add some observability to your application. So one is OpenTelemetry. Who uses OpenTelemetry in their applications? Okay, so, you know, about 10%. And so what's cool about OpenTelemetry is, you know, you add some dependency on OpenTelemetry and it'll start generating, you know, a lot of interesting data that you can then use to trace through your application using a tool like Jaeger, which is the one I'm showing here right now. So I think I can show this without internet. I think I have a local version. So I'm going to close this and close this, and we'll go back to our terminal because I have another project here, code Quarkus observability. And if you're interested in seeing this code, I pushed it all to GitHub, so you should be able to find it there too. They're, you know, simple examples, but make it a little bit handy. So you can see here in my pom.xml, I added a OpenTelemetry dependency and then an OpenTelemetry JDBC dependency. And by just adding those dependencies, we can now start generating some interesting data. So I'm going to start this application with my local dev mode, so Quarkus dev. And then, you know, with Spring Boot, kind of similar process. So you can see that, you know, everything is starting up. And let's go to this application. So I think it also has a fruit endpoint. No. Timed cannot be resolved property. That's kind of interesting. So it's looking for a dependency, which it cannot resolve. Let's see, where is it? Here it is. Let's remove that. I don't know why that's not happy. Anyway, let's try it again. Fruit. Yeah. And then it was complaining about entity. Wow. Okay. Well, there's this application isn't exactly running the way that it's supposed to. I think there's something wrong with pom.xml that was updated. Well, that's okay. We can, let's see. Maybe we can go to the other application again, the Quarkus with DB, and let's, I don't know if these dependencies are going to be installable, but we can give it a try, right? So Quarkus extension add OpenTelemetry. Let's see what that does. That looks, oh, okay. And then, what was it, JDBC? No. Does anybody remember what it was exactly? If I had internet, this would be easy because I could just use the plugin and then it would tell me exactly what the syntax is. Let's open another window with the other version that wasn't working, but it at least had the right dependency. Some live debugging here, guys. All right, so it was OpenTelemetry JDBC. Okay. What was different? Ah, okay, yeah. It's not Quarkus. All right, so let's go back here. Quarkus. Oops. It was OpenTelemetry JDBC, right? That's interesting that it just automatically adds the Quarkus group ID if that's what it's trying to do. OpenTelemetry JDBC. Anyway, yeah, so you'll just have to believe me that this worked. And then we can go to our Jaeger tracing. And I did create some traces earlier today. So again, cheated a little bit, but that's good. because now we can see that if we go to our demo app, well, we can see our error at least. So we can see, you know, like, hey, there was an error, and here's the logs for that error. We can see how long the request took and everything. So, you know, we can see what the exception was, unresolved compilation problem. So we have all that data externalized out of our application. So especially if you're in a distributed environment, if you're in Kubernetes or whatever, you have centralized, you know, kind of logs. We can see how long requests took. And in this case, you know, what I wanted to show is that if you make a database request, for example, with the OpenTelemetry JDBC, it would also kind of show you, hey, it made a call to the database with this request and everything. So you get that pretty much out of the box if you add the OpenTelemetry extension or dependency in your application. So then another one that's also kind of in that observability realm is Micrometer. So he uses Micrometer. So a few more hands because it's also a little more integrated with Spring Boot, right? And so, you know, Micrometer allows you, by just adding a dependency for Micrometer, to generate metrics of, you know, how is my application behaving? You know, what is the impact of this change? What is the garbage collector doing? What kind of memory are we using in our application? And then it can forward that to a collector like you know, Prometheus or something, where then you can create really pretty graphs of how your application is behaving and everything. But it gives you a lot of feedback, right? So to see, you know, hey, is there a performance issue with our application? You know, kind of, or is there a specific node in our Kubernetes that's behaving differently because it has its limits set differently or something? So you get a lot of that feedback from your application. So I'm going to try it real quick. Let's see if it works. So Quarkus extension add Micrometer. Okay, so that one worked. And then I think I need to add, I'm going to cheat again to the other application because it did, wow, hey, stop hiding. Bye. Micrometer registry Prometheus. So I'm going to add that one. We can just slap it straight into the POM. We could have, I suppose I could have done that with the other component too. It's for OpenTelemetry. Because like, so every time you do a Quarkus extension add, basically what it does is just adds a dependency in your pom.xml. So let's add that here and then start this up in dev mode, or is it already started in dev mode? Nope, so we can do it. Quarkus dev, start up our application again. Let's see what's gonna happen. And then start up that database again, right? Because that's dependency on Postgres. And then let's go look and see if we go to our fruit endpoint, yeah, we got some fruits. And so now if we go to localhost 8080/q/metrics is I think where it by default puts its metrics, you can see, wow, this is a lot of data, right? So this is formatted for Prometheus, and Prometheus knows how to read this. So then you can search through these metrics to say, like, hey, what is my JVM memory committed bytes, or what type of garbage collector was my application using, what worker pool threads are being used and everything. So you get all that information that you can then use to get some insight into your application. So let's close this up here, and I'm going to close this and then go back to our slides and then go to the next subject. If you're releasing applications, so you have you're distributing applications, you have maybe a component that you want to push to Maven Central, or that you're just distributing to your users. It becomes a little bit complicated sometimes because you need to push it, you need to zip it up, or in some given format, maybe it's an application that you want to use with Homebrew on your Mac or something. There's a project out there that's called JReleaser, which makes this a lot easier. Does anybody know or use JReleaser? So we got a few hands. So JReleaser is pretty cool. So it works with the build tools like Maven and then NPM and stuff like that. And then basically you can release your application. You can tell it in what kind of format to package up your application, and then push it, for example, to GitHub to create a release in GitHub. You can also package it up for Homebrew, for Jbang even, and then you can also announce every time you've made a release. So just by creating a release, it'll do all that stuff for you. So for example, I'm releasing my new version of my application, and it'll post to Twitter or Mastodon that, hey, Kevin has released version XYZ to his GitHub repository, for example. So how you get started with this is you use JReleaser init, then you assemble your code, and then you probably want to configure it to your needs. But then after you've done that, you just do Maven dist package, and that's going to package it up with the required format. And then JReleaser release, full release is what's going to actually push it to wherever it needs to be pushed, Maven Central or GitHub or whatever, and then create those announcements. So yeah, again, without internet, this is probably not going to be very successful to show you this. But yeah, definitely check out JReleaser if you want to push out application. It's a really cool project. So in this session, I just went through kind of a opinionated set of tools that you can use as a Java developer to become, maybe a little bit more productive, or at least have fun doing so. So, we visited SDKMAN, so, to install and use different versions of Java. We use Jbang to create simple Java applications, to create CLI applications with Java, to interact with ChatGPT, even though, today that didn't work. We used Quarkus, and again, I'm very kind of biased towards Quarkus, but I really do think it's a really cool project to make developers more productive. There's a lot more cool stuff in that project. As you maybe saw, I was using Podman Desktop. So if you're using Docker Desktop, Podman Desktop is completely license free. So that's why I like it. It's fully open source, and has some extra capabilities to push to Kubernetes, and you can even run pods, like it says in its name. I didn't specifically visit MicroProfile today, but MicroProfile is a really cool project too, for creating kind of common specs. So, for example, there's like the health component of MicroProfile to create health endpoints for your application if you're going to push to Kubernetes. It has a bunch of different components as part of the MicroProfile spec, which is a collaboration between different organizations, so you're not kind of using specific vendor-specific stuff. And then we saw OpenTelemetry and Micrometer to have easy observability of our applications. So with that, I think just maybe a shout out to my colleagues who have written some interesting books, and Red Hat is nice enough to sponsor us when we write books, and then by doing that, they get the rights for you to download these books for free, whereas otherwise, you'd have to pay O'Reilly to download these books. So thanks to Red Hat, you can get access to these books, which is pretty cool. And then, what I wanted to show as well, and couldn't, is the OpenShift Sandbox, just because I was going to deploy it to a Kubernetes, and this one is the one that you can just access for free to play around with, and it's super easy to get started with. But yeah, and then with that, a little bit shorter than it was supposed to be, because the demos were a little bit limited today. But hopefully this was still interesting to you. Maybe learned one or two new tools, and if you have any questions, I think we have a few minutes, but if not, you can always find me in the hallway track afterwards. And if you're interested in following along, I try to post a lot about developer productivity, developer experience, about interesting tools and stuff like that. So definitely give me a follow on one of these channels. And with that, thank you.